You all right? We can edit this part out if you need to.
The giggles.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine.
What's water or anything?
I'm good. Have
Okay.
some down here.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks for agreeing to have this film today.
Of course.
Awesome. So let's get into it. I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes just so that I can keep ourselves on task here today.
Okay.
And we'll see where we're at. Okay. So I have some feedback for you. I have some questions. I'd like to go through your spot observation form from your formal, which was yesterday, and then we will get into it. So tell me, what are some thoughts on your lesson that you've had, that you've had some time to reflect?
I mean, I think it went pretty good. I mean, it was pretty just generic. Like, all of my kids, no matter where they were in their reading level, were kind of just doing the same thing. So, like, I didn't really differentiate a ton from, like, my super high readers or kids that could have zoomed in past it in 5 minutes. And then my low kiddos, I mean, obviously they were getting that listening comprehension, but there wasn't a ton of differentiation. So I kind of just blasted out the whole thing to everybody, which I think is sometimes okay. But I think overall, like, it went pretty good. I mean, they were engaged, I thought, like, the whole time. And they love reading the story, so I think that's, like, a big piece of it. It's just they're engaged just by what we're reading about.
Tell me more about the conversation we had yesterday that, in which I asked the question, why do a choral read? You said it was about the story, so tell me a little bit more about that.
I wrote some things out too. I could have done it differently. I mean, I could have typed it out in a reader's theater format, and I could have put them into groups, and they could have had different, voices, because a lot of it was, dialogue between characters talking. Could have had them partner read it, but I don't think it would have had the same effect. We've been practicing on, like, voice inflection and using good voices, and I think that was pretty evident. And I think it was good that we switched back and forth between boys and girls, because as much as I was kind of bribing them by saying who could win or who could read the best, like, they all are reading.
They did a good job.
So,
choral reading.
I don't know, I think sometimes it's just fun to have that noise in a class of everybody kind of reading together. So I think it just made it funner.
Do you think that all kids learned the target that you had them shoot for yesterday?
So my checks for understanding were not based off of my target.
Okay.
So I think that was maybe like a little disconnected, because my target was I wanted them to compare and contrast a previous chapter and then the chapter that they had read today. And all of my checks for understanding were based off of just that one chapter. So until I actually look at their work product, like their page that they were working on independently, I won't really be able to see if they have compared and contrasted,
Okay.
because my checks weren't comparing and contrasting. My checks were just basic comprehension of what we were currently reading.
So why is that? Which do you think would be better? Aligned to your target or aligned to the activity that you're currently doing?
I mean, I think they need to be aligned, but we've been doing compare and contrast so much in our writing classes, during WIN, during just like all the time, because that's one of our huge power standards.
Okay.
So they should be able to do it independently, and I'm kind of wanting to look at that and go, do they have it or not? Because we're kind of ready to go on. So I think my target and my checks for understandings could have been a little bit more.
Okay, so let me paraphrase what you just said. That
I went in a circle.
your target, that's okay. Your target is aligned to compare and contrast. Chapter that they did before to the chapter they read today. Your checks for understanding were not aligned to that, but aligned to comprehension and questions arisen from the text. That you think you could have been more aligned, but you also said in there that you've been doing compare and contrast so much that you think the kids got it.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate paraphrase of what you said?
Yes, and once I actually get their finished product on Tuesday, then I can really check and see. And I know there's a little bit of lag time.
So tell me why you don't know if they got compare and contrast already. If you've been doing a lot and you think they know it, why don't you know?
I've been doing a lot of like hand holding with it,
Okay.
which is fine, and we've been doing a ton of different things with compare and contrast. they should be fully capable, so a lot of them should get it. Especially because the components of the compare and contrast chart were character, setting, problem, solution, and when we read chapter 1, we went over all of those components. So if they were going back to the text and we're kind of refreshing from what we had read before, they should be.
So your deal.
So I'm confident that when I look at them, they're gonna get it.
So let me ask you, if you're confident of them getting it, why did you do another lesson of them, of you teaching compare and contrast?
Because my confidence isn't always the reality. I want to.
How do you make your confidence the reality?
By looking and seeing, okay, they got it.
You assess them, right?
Yeah, and so this to me is kind of like an assessment because they're doing it by themselves.
So did you get a DOL from them yesterday? I left in the last couple minutes.
Because they only had about like 5 or 6 minutes to actually start it, just because of time wise.
Okay, so I'm pressing you a little bit today because
Oh,
I want you to start moving in that growth pattern
Mm-hmm.
of. So you said yesterday was the assessment,
Well, it wasn't
But-
finished.
but you didn't finish the assessment.
No.
So now we're gonna send them off on a 4-day weekend, and then you're gonna assess them on Tuesday. Is that your lesson plan on Tuesday?
Yeah, because they need to be able to go back to a text
Have you already created that lesson plan?
for a Tuesday.
To assess them on compare and contrast.
It's a continuation from what they started yesterday.
So then that's
So no.
That's what I would
Mhm.
I would tell you. I think that's a lot of where our conversations are going right now.
Mhm.
Of if Kylie Hammond thinks that they have it, give them an assessment.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have, short of the fact that we need to get Thor's Hammer story to them through core knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
If your target is the compare and contrast piece, with using Thor's Hammer content knowledge to get there, and you think they got it, stop what you're doing, assess them,
Mm-hmm.
and then move on.
Okay.
Okay, you have the ability to do so.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you spending, in your words, lots and lots of time on compare and contrast.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't want it to be our power standard if we got it.
Yeah.
If we got it, let's teach them something that they don't got,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we're about to talk about your lesson plan here in a second, but I think you're in a place to be able to say, to stop and go, all right, hey, you know what, guys? Give me 2 seconds. We're going to come up with our new avenue for this. Now I want us to start thinking about setting, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Setting is the next step in understanding this thing. Here, real quick, as we're reading this, I'm going to tell you what setting is. Setting is the place, the idea, the atmosphere of where the story takes place, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily in your CKLA book for the next step,
Yeah.
but you know that that's the next
Mm-hmm.
standard that we're going to hit. And so it's okay for you to stop and move them forward. That's really what I would like to have seen.
Okay.
So when I look at your target yesterday, I was kind of like, she's doing a lot of things in this classroom today that's not aligned to that target.
Yeah.
And I understood where your target was heading because I've looked at your standards. But what I wanted to see Kylie doing is hitting the targets that you're setting forth for those kids. Really, it looks like yesterday's lesson, and tell me if I'm wrong, you wanted kids to understand the moral of the story of Thor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was like a lot of predictions and their opinion, like, what do you think? How would you act? Because that's another one of the pieces that we've looked at data, and they're not good at pulling.
Then what should have been your target yesterday?
Should have been that.
Should have been that. Okay, awesome. Are there any changes you would have, we talked about this a little bit yesterday too, but are there any changes you would have done to make your lesson better now that you've had some time to reflect?
I mean, besides my target and my checks for understandings kind of being a little bit more cohesive,
Okay.
and not kind of just like sporadic all over the place. I mean, honestly, probably not.
Okay.
I mean,
Give me a rating. What do you think that lesson was yesterday? 1 out of 10. 10 being the single best lesson ever taught in the history of lessons.
probably like an 8.
An 8. So you still can improve.
Yeah, you can always improve.
Aligning the target and, in your words, more purposeful checks for understanding.
Yes.
What are some things that your students might be doing different the next time you teach this lesson?
My students may be doing differently.
Mm-hmm.
honestly don't know.
Okay, that's a fair answer. I'm gonna push you a little bit, but.
I mean, I think, like, in the grand scheme of it, they partner talked, they table talked, like, they
Okay.
did a lot of, like, good things. They wrote an answer down. I don't know, like, they had different modalities of, like, communicating. I was hopeful that they all were reading. There was a few that I walked by and they were just like, "Meow, meow, meow," but, you know,
Which that can be difficult in core
and that's
reading.
just, yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of just life. You're not always going to have every single kid 100% all the time with it.
But we can shoot for it though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think yesterday, honestly, like, when I was walking around, most of them,
They were.
yeah. And I've been doing more, like, whiteboard, like, when we read, they have the whiteboards out and write, like, I've been doing more of that. And the first time I did it, like, with all the little supplies, y'all were like, this was so fun, can we do this again? So I know that they enjoy, like, stopping and, like, doing activities after each page, which I think is cool that they enjoy that.
And those are purposeful activities, and you, I'm gonna push back on a couple of things you just said in that one too. When you say that you could have more cohesive, checks for understanding, I thought your checks for understanding were fantastic yesterday.
Yeah. But maybe to my target.
Sure, I get that, but I understood what your real target was yesterday.
Yeah.
Your real target was to have kids understand and engage in the story, and then be able to understand what not only the plot of the story was, but making inferences about the plot of the story. Will this work for Thor if he dresses up as a woman or not? Would you dress up as a woman in order to get what you needed? And so the checks for understanding, I don't want you to test that at all.
Yeah.
That was
I agree.
that was
Yeah.
great, and I want you to keep doing that. You also said that not every kid can be on it 100% of the time.
They can.
You're one of the few classes in which that's my expectation for your
Yeah.
class. I actually left there yesterday and I talked to somebody and said, there's just something about the way that you instruct and the way that you have set the stage of a really good balance of high expectations, you really care and love for those kids, and your personality has created this balance in the room in which kids want to perform for you. And so if 100% of your kids are not engaged in this lesson, that is Kylie not meeting her own expectations, okay? And what my expectations are for Miss Hammond, because your kids can be 100% on it. Every kid in this building can be on it 100% of the time. You have the rare ability to do that, and so when your kids are not on it, I want you to be thinking about, hey, wait a minute, I can do this.
Yeah.
And so how do I figure this out? Okay. Last question I got for you. As you reflect on the lesson yesterday, has your professional development this year helped move you towards some of the things that you did yesterday, or was this just the standard protocols of your lessons?
I mean, I think the fact that we've been looking more at standards and, like, besides CKLA, like, what it says in the book, and it's a resource and you have the freedom to branch out. I mean, I've been, like, as a team, we've been making our own worksheets, and, like, that one yesterday I made on my own, and I had purposeful, like, higher level thinking questions that I think before I wouldn't have done, just knowing that there are standards that are good that we need to be hitting, you know, just like all the kind of the shift in mindset of our school. And I think it's good to do this and just like kind of have it all be out. But honestly, even if I didn't type all this up, I do a lot of this stuff anyways.
Okay.
I mean, you know, like I always do. Like these are just things that I just do all the time. Yeah, I took a little bit more thought to do these questions. But I think looking back on like the previous lessons, like I do all this kind of anyway. So, I mean, I think just looking more in depth at standards and like what they're needing has been helpful for all content areas for even just like my whole team and myself. Just kind of opening the door to there's other things out there we need to be getting.
I would agree. So a couple leverage points I have for you, okay? 7 steps, do it well. I would really like to see some more implementation of 7 steps, but that's where your ability to move your lessons forward are really going to be there, okay? Your checks for understanding are right on point. That was some of the best purposefully planned checks for understanding that I've seen. I did see that when I was looking at your lesson plan, I provided you some feedback on your lesson plan that I want you to take a look at.
Mhm.
I see that you planned it in your reading of what you're gonna do with them.
Mhm.
I'm gonna say one of your leverage points is your planning of your checks for understanding. So I understand how this can be difficult. This is where you need to be.
Yeah.
I should see Kylie planning a lesson like this every single day. And I know this takes a lot of time. Once you get better at it, it becomes a lot of copy and paste as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that I had done in when I was in the classroom was I just had my banks. So there's not a billion checks for understanding that you can do. There's about 10, and it became copy and pasting from one bank to the next, and I got my standards, and then all of a sudden lesson plans, especially even extensive lesson plans like this, started to take me about 10 minutes to do.
Yeah.
But you being purposeful, hey, with this guided practice, I'm going to do this check for understanding, and I'm going to ask this question. And that's where you're going to get the big bang for your buck.
Yeah.
Because not only are you planning for it, but you're having time to sit with it, you're having time to think on it, to alter it if you need to go back and go, you know what, I'm going to use this lesson again next year. Today with this just did not work for me, and so I need to do something else. The other one is differentiation. That was a whole class activity, but part of our conversation right now is how are we using the tier 2 when time and intervention, and you and I are going to have some more conversations about that, but how are we using that to be able to influence and impact our tier 1 instruction. So I did like the fact that Justice, Emmett, Caden, and Haley were going to be working with you on this at the end of the lesson. They didn't get much of your time yesterday because you just ran out of time.
Yeah.
Sticking to your lesson plan, moving them forward a little bit quicker, embedding this differentiation into your guided practice, that's where you get the big bang for your buck. Super proud of you for your CFUs tomorrow or yesterday. Your routines were on point. Multiple student responses of cold calls, hands called, true false cards. I love that stuff. I like the fact that you have a popsicle stick in there. That's interesting. I have not seen that yet this year. But I think that brings you into, again, back to that original conversation of this is how you can, you create that balance of positivity in your classroom in which everybody wants to learn. I know you have a couple questions for me, but here's the plan I'd like to move forward with, okay? I want to review some lessons together. The next time I come in for a spot, we're going to do a pre and a post. I'm going to set up a time for you to plan a lesson in this format.
Okay.
You and I are going to go through it together. You're going to redo your lesson plan. I'm going to come in and watch, and then we're going to do a post feedback session.
Okay.
I want that differentiation plan in the meantime for what we're doing with our tier 1. I want you to bring that to that pre-observation, and I also want you to start implementing that in the meantime of what are the strategies that I'm using during my win time and how am I impacting that in my tier 1 instruction, okay? And the last one is I'm actually going to reach out to some district personnel to provide you with some professional development on how best to get your, what reading strategies could you use, because you really got me thinking a lot about how do, when I have a cool story, how do I get the most out of it within the classroom? Is choral response the best? It may be, but I want you to have somebody other than me to talk to about that. Okay. What questions do you have for me?
You asked me some questions in there, and I kind of just had responded.
Okay.
You had asked about why I chose those kids. I just said Dibbles data. 2 of those kids actually weren't there, so I pulled the next lowest kids in Dibbles, Ethan and Jesse. They came and joined us.
Okay.
So for the whole tricky word piece, how would you, like, I need some suggestions with that, because you had typed in, like, how can we make that awesome instead of just tricky words? Because I've done.
So it's going to come back to this.
Okay.
Okay. When you're effectively planning in advance, when you're going through that story 2 weeks in advance, and you're creating that lesson plan, and that's where I want you to get to. I want you to get to this type of lesson planning multiple weeks in advance. So again, like you have some time to be able to sit with it, but also you have some time to do the next tier of work. When you go through there and CKLA gives you the tricky words, why not put those tricky words on a spelling test 2 weeks prior? why not send those tricky sight words home for homework before you get to the instruction in class. Why I like that, and I think that's a great thing, that's one of the good things that CKLA brings to the table, is those tricky words, and I love the fact you guys have the that red thing in your
chart.
chart in the back. But how do you take that and have them embed it before the learning took place right there at the story?
Okay.
That if they've learned those words a couple of times beforehand, then they come in and they can interact with that story in a much better fashion.
Okay.
That's
So
what
it's
I'm
like
talking
a
about more often.
super advanced pre-taught.
Sure,
word.
why not?
Yeah. Okay.
Knowing, and so CKLA also said that those were tricky words. I would imagine there's other words in there that some of your intervention kids or your differentiated kids might need to have sent home prior. That's that next tier of teaching.
Okay. I think we covered it all.
Did a great job. I'm terribly pleased that you're a teacher here in this building. I hope the scoring on your rubric made sense to you. There's really no glaring concerns. Like I said, I would work on your warm up. You and I can talk more about how we can align our targets to exactly what we want kids to be able to do that day, and then an assessment through a DO at the end to tell me exactly what they've learned. The last thing I would tell you is that even when we're running out of time, I want this done. So, hey,
Well, I could have just had them do it on the whiteboard.
Yeah,
Okay, right now. Yeah.
You could have just said, leave it on your leave it on your desk. Had taken the kids out to carpool, and then your DOL check is you picking up all the whiteboards at the end of the day.
Okay.
Great job though. I'll reach out to you about next steps. Take a look at my notes. Take a look at ways that we can improve. Take a look at the ideas on the lesson plan, and
Okay.
let's just keep moving forward.
Sounds good.
Thank you for teaching for us.
Thank you.
Awesome.